I had come to the quiet village of Tottori, seeking a moment of peace and a slower pace of life. The serene surroundings felt inviting, but that morning, there was a tension in the air that broke the tranquility. As I made my way along the moss-covered stone steps of an old forest shrine, something beneath a broken red gate caught my eye. Curiosity led me closer, and my heart sank at the sight before me. There, struggling to survive, was a mother cat, her thin body partially hidden by weeds. She looked frail, her dirty fur matted with mud and pine needles, and her ribs were visible beneath her torn skin, almost as if they were trying to push through. Next to her, I noticed 3 tiny kittens, huddled together and vulnerable. They were so small that they could fit in my hand, their soft mews faintly echoing like leaves rustling in the breeze. In that moment, I didn't know their names or how long they had been in this situation, but I instinctively felt the weight of the choice before me. If I turned away now, they might not survive the night, and that thought lingered uncomfortably in my mind. Though I had passed this shrine many times before, it had always seemed like just another forgotten landmark. Today, though, it felt transformed. As I crouched down slowly, my heart raced, fearful that my approach might scare the mother or confirm my worst fears. When her eyes opened, they were dull but held a fierce spirit. She remained still, yet her gaze seemed to say, "Stay away from my babies." The kittens, in contrast, were restless. One tried to climb onto her back, another hid beneath her paw, and the smallest trembled, gasping for breath. I realized I was unprepared. No gloves, no food, not even a carrier, just a frayed canvas bag and a racing heartbeat. I leaned in slightly and spoke softly. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." Her response was not welcoming. The mother hissed, her lips curling to reveal a few remaining teeth. It was a quiet sound, weary and strained, but it stopped me in my tracks. I found myself hesitating, unsure if reaching out would make things worse. But then, in a moment of hope, the smallest kitten crawled toward me. In the quiet of the night, I was jolted awake by a faint scratching noise. It took a moment for my mind to clear, but I soon understood that Shizu, the mother cat, was attempting to drag herself out of the cardboard box beside me. Her fragile legs shook with effort, and fear gripped me as I realized she wasn't just moving, she was trying to get away. Before I could reach her, she collapsed halfway to the door. I rushed to her side, panic bubbling inside me. Just then, Emiko, my retired neighbor who once ran the local veterinary clinic, appeared in the room, still groggy and barefoot. Earlier that day, I had tried to comfort myself with thoughts of the kittens, who were instinctively nursing from their mother. It was evident they were aware of their surroundings and felt safe, almost as if sensing the warmth of protection I was trying to provide. Yet, despite that, Shizu seemed to be clinging to life by a thread. Just 2 days had passed since I found the little family. I remembered how I had impulsively reached out to touch the tiny kittens, feeling their damp fur against my fingers. As I housed them in my satchel, I was filled with uncertainty, yet somehow knew I had to act. The mother cat had been too weak to stand and had collapsed when I approached. It was then that I felt something inside me break. After gathering my thoughts, I called Emiko for help, hoping her experience would guide me. She answered quickly, and her calm assurances gave me a sense of purpose. "Be gentle. Don't talk. Keep them warm," she directed, her voice steady. Collecting the kittens had been surprisingly simple. They seemed to understand they were being taken to safety. But lifting Shizu was different. She felt like a precious piece of my heart, hot with fever, and her breathing was erratic. I worried that she wouldn't survive the journey to Emiko's clinic. When we arrived, my instincts kicked in. Blankets were laid out, fluids were prepared, and the warmth of a heat lamp enveloped the box where the kittens settled, their curious eyes reflecting their new, uncertain world. In that moment of urgency, Toma, my neighbor, strode in, arms crossed and a frown on his face. "You're bringing strays into your house now? Don't let them get too comfortable," he grumbled. I chose not to engage right then. My focus was solely on Shizu. Despite Emiko's caution not to get my hopes up, a flicker of hope still ignited within me. Shizu had not given up, though her strength was fading. It was as if her love for her kittens was keeping her alive, a force beyond mere survival. And now, laying on the floor of that spare room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in the midst of something profound. caught between hope and despair as I cared for this fragile family. The following morning, a surprising discovery shifted the focus of our mission. Emiko found a faint tattoo behind Shizu's ear, a number that hinted at her past. It turned out that Shizu had once belonged to someone, perhaps a victim of an illegal breeder who had been shut down long ago. This revelation gave Shizu's story new meaning. She wasn't just a stray, but a reminder of a broken system that often neglects the vulnerable. Our rescue mission was no longer just about saving a life. It had transformed into a quest for justice. As we laid Shizu back down, we all felt the weight of her journey. That night did not bring the expected end. Instead, we found ourselves clinging to hope. Shizu was still alive, albeit barely. Her breathing was soft, and her once fearful eyes were now closed in a peaceful slumber. Yet, shadows lingered in her story, tales of abandonment and suffering hidden from the world. The thought of her being bred and left to suffer in a lonely place weighed heavily on my heart. In the kitchen, Emiko stood holding the tag number, her gaze flickering to the old landline phone. The morning light filtered through the rice paper windows, casting a warm glow over the tatami floor where the kittens lay nestled together. They breathed in a rhythm that felt innocent and calm, a stark contrast to the struggles around them. That afternoon, Toma stopped by again. His demeanor was different, heavy footsteps and a guarded expression. He took a moment to look at the kittens, then wandered to the porch to light a cigarette, letting the smoke drift away. I didn't expect him to show any concern, but then he spoke, and his words resonated. "Are you thinking of keeping them, or just dragging them through more dying?" There was no malice in his tone, just a subtle understanding rooted in his own experiences with pain. I was taken aback, feeling a swirl of emotions. It wasn't that I lacked thoughts to share. I was grappling with a choice that weighed heavily on my heart. There was a tension inside me, a pull between taking the easier path and making a choice that would resonate deeply. News of our rescue efforts began to circulate through the village. Whispers spread like a gentle wind through the bamboo groves, soft yet persistent. By the 5th day, the community was abuzz with stories, and I found myself contemplating what it meant to be part of something larger, a mission that could bring not only hope to these kittens, but also awareness to a crucial issue. As the rain softly drummed against the tin roof, I found myself sitting cross-legged beside a cardboard box, watching the kittens sleep. Earlier, Kiko had nestled up to me, her gentle purr creating a comforting rhythm. Miso curled against her mother, so tiny that I felt a pang of anxiety, thinking she might disappear if I blinked at her too quickly. But Shizu was different. Although her breathing was steady, the wariness in her eyes told another story, as though she were contemplating what it meant to stay in this world. In moments like these, I couldn't help but question my motives. Was I doing this for the kittens, or was it for me? The thought of sending them away to a shelter or into the unknown felt like losing a piece of myself. Yet, keeping them also weighed heavily on my mind. Was I truly capable of providing the life they deserved? Before they arrived, my days were quiet, predictable, and comfortable. Now, my life swirled around feeding times, careful baths, and the undeniable responsibility of caring for them. Earlier that day, I had stepped into the corner store and felt the instant scrutiny of 2 elderly women who momentarily paused their conversation to stare. A boy pointed at my coat pocket, where Miso often liked to snuggle, and innocently asked if I was starting my own zoo. It wasn't meant to be unkind. It was just the reaction of a close-knit community faced with something unfamiliar. The moment that changed everything arrived unexpectedly when the landlord showed up on the porch, clipboard in hand and a smile fixed on his face. "I've been hearing about the animals," he said calmly. "This place wasn't really meant for pets, especially not several." His eyes drifted toward the box Emiko had set up under the kotatsu, where Nori peeked out with a mix of curiosity and defiance. I tried to reason with him, but his concerns about damage and responsibility were clear and practical, making our conversation feel less confrontational and more like an unavoidable reality. That evening, as Emiko prepared tea in silence, her voice, when she finally spoke, was softer than usual. "They'll need a decision soon, a home, a future. Otherwise, someone else will make that choice for them." Her words lingered between us, heavy and unspoken, like a second pot of tea that neither of us was ready to pour. Emiko often reminded me that the heart sometimes makes promises that the hands struggle to keep. In that quiet moment, surrounded by sleeping kittens and uncertainty, I sensed the weight of those promises pushing on my chest. What path lay ahead? The search began with a simple realization: Nori was missing. The back door had been left slightly open, an invitation for a curious kitten to explore. At first, I didn't notice his absence. It only struck me when I reached for his food bowl, expecting to find it empty. Panic set in as I rushed through the house, checking every corner, every shadow, behind cabinets, under beds, hoping to find him safe. Outside, the rain had just let up, leaving muddy paw prints scattered across the porch. We spent countless hours looking for him in the woods, calling out his name until our voices were hoarse. Emiko was calm and focused, but I could sense the tension in her shoulders. Toma joined us, silently passing me a flashlight, as if the light could illuminate our way to his return. As night fell and hope began to wane, a sinking feeling settled inside me. The illusion of control slipped through my fingers. Lying awake long past midnight, the door still ajar, I listened for any sounds that might herald his return. One kitten lost, one connection broken. All I could do was wait. Wait for him to come back, or for the weight of my guilt to become unbearable. While we searched, the atmosphere in the house shifted. For days it felt eerily quiet, every creak of the floorboards pulling my attention toward the door. The other kittens, at first lively, became subdued. They huddled together, rarely moving far from their mother. Even Shizu, who had started to eat from Emiko's hand, spent hours staring at the porch as if she sensed somebody was missing. Then, on the 9th day, the atmosphere began to change. The kittens cautiously resumed their play, darting across the wooden floor, their small bodies filled with curious energy. I watched as Shizu, though still fragile, raised her head to observe, engaging with the world around her for the first time. I let myself entertain a hopeful thought: perhaps they would be okay. That optimism didn't last long. The very next morning, all hope seemed to vanish as Nori remained absent. In the midst of my worry, I found myself talking to the kittens more often, trying to fill the heavy silence with words, even as my heart balanced precariously between hope and despair. What would it take for us to feel whole again? As I engaged with them, I realized that this bond, although strained, could still bring us comfort amidst the uncertainty. Each morning began with the quiet company of my pets, who had seamlessly integrated into my life. Kiko would nestle into my lap, resting her little head close to me, her gentle purring filling the space with a soothing presence. Miso, on the other hand, trailed after me from room to room, her stuffed mouse clutched in her mouth, her wide eyes following my every move. They were more than just animals. They had woven themselves into the fabric of my daily routine, subtly influencing decisions that loomed nearby. As I navigated this new reality, I hesitated to answer calls or emails that hinted at my old life. That shift did not go unnoticed by Emiko. One evening, she remarked, "They're changing you." I felt a pang of resistance to that thought, yet deep down, I understood its truth. I hadn't just given these pets a second chance. In return, they filled a void I had barely acknowledged. With Nori still missing and no word from the local shelters or the villagers, the bond I was forming with Kiko and Miso felt delicate, almost like we were pretending to be a complete family. How long could we uphold this illusion? On the 12th day of waiting, while we sheltered outside from the consistent patter of rain, Emiko confronted the unspoken concern. She spoke quietly, sipping her tea while observing the world beyond us. "If they stay, they'll need more than your heart. They'll need a life you haven't built yet." Instead of feeling hurt, her words resonated with a genuine weight. I gazed toward the tree line, still hoping against hope that Nori might return, but the shadows remained empty. A question surfaced in my mind: was my attachment to Kiko and Miso rooted in love, or was it out of fear of losing more? Later that evening, Toma approached with a cloth-wrapped object, a wooden box containing a weathered collar. Found it at the creek's edge, thought it might be his. His reference to Nori didn't need elaboration. I accepted the box delicately, treating it like something precious, as if it still held warmth. Once everyone had departed, I settled beside Shizu, who slept peacefully. I whispered my only truth. I didn't know where this path was leading, but turning back wasn't an option. Yet I realized that choosing to keep Kiko and Miso would require me to embrace a life I wasn't prepared for, while letting them go would bring a deep sense of regret. Either decision meant losing something I might never recover. The morning light crept into the room, soft and gray, creating a space that felt caught in an in-between moment. Kiko was the first to wake, stretching beside me before curling up against my side, her body warm and reassuring. I hadn't moved throughout the night. Each time I attempted to fall asleep, the sound of a clipboard sliding across a counter echoed in my mind, a reminder of the choices weighing on me. In the kitchen, Emiko was already busy in the garden. Her sleeves were rolled up and she knelt in the soil, working without haste. It was clear she understood when to take action and when to patiently await the right moment. Yesterday had unfolded slowly, beginning at the village shelter, a small concrete building at the edge of town. As I stood there, surrounded by wire fences and forgotten toys, a mix of disinfectant and despair filled the air. A receptionist handed me a clipboard without a word, likely sensing the turmoil in my heart, a struggle between love and practicality. I stared at the blank intake forms for what felt like forever, yet I couldn't bring myself to write down a single name. Returning home, I found Emiko packing supplies, extra food, soft bedding, and medication. She didn't ask questions, just offered me a look that conveyed understanding, like friends who know each other's thoughts without words. "I can handle them if you can't," she said, her voice free of judgment or pressure. It was an invitation to express my feelings or to step back without shame. But I remained silent. Instead, I knelt beside Shizu, my fingers tracing her fur where her ribs were visible, a painful reminder of her fragility. She leaned into my touch, her eyes closed in trust, touching me more deeply than words could. The kittens were peacefully sleeping, except for Kiko, who gazed at me with wide, expectant eyes, as if waiting for the words I still hadn't found. Outside, the woods held a crow calling sharply, its sound a reminder of an ending that felt permanent. I knew I hadn't made my choice yet, but deep down, I sensed I wouldn't find solace until I did. The door knocked unexpectedly, and Toma stood outside, his expression unreadable. He didn't step inside, but handed me a well-worn envelope. When I opened it, faded, water-damaged photos spilled out, showing another litter, another time, each image a reminder of past regrets. He didn't say a word, and somehow he didn't have to. His quiet presence spoke volumes, guiding me toward the choices I felt deep inside, waiting to surface without drama. I walked onto the porch, Kiko nestled in my jacket, her little claws holding onto the fabric by my collarbone. The familiar sense of damp cedar and moist earth greeted me, and somewhere in the distance, an unidentified bird called out, as if trying to recall something significant. My focus shifted to Shizu, curled protectively around Miso. Her breathing was steady, a sign of resilience. When she opened her eyes and caught my gaze, I noticed there was no longer fear or urgency, just a calm awareness. It was clear she wasn't waiting for a rescue. She had survived, and that act alone was what mattered most in that moment. I found Emiko absorbed in her gardening, not looking up as I approached. I decided not to seek her opinion. Instead, I simply shared what was on my mind. They stay, if they'll have me. Emiko paused, acknowledging the importance of my words with a faint smile before resuming her digging. Later, I cleared the back room, preparing it with soft bedding, old sweaters, and a clean dish of water. Gently, I brought Shizu there, and she accepted the change without resistance, blinking slowly as if aware of what was unfolding. As evening settled in and the kittens nestled close, the house felt transformed. It was no longer just a space for sleep, but a room filled with possibilities, crafted quietly without formal agreements. Yet, as I reflected on the day, a thought lingered. Someone was missing. Life often presents us with moments that catch us completely off guard. Sometimes, these moments lead us down unexpected paths, much like when we choose to rescue an animal in need, which can happen when we least expect it. Take, for example, the weeks that followed the arrival of 3 kittens. Miso, with her innate curiosity, quickly learned to climb the chair legs. Kiko found comfort nestled in my laundry basket, while Shizu, once timid, gradually gained strength and demeanor. Her eyes, previously wary, began to watch me with a newfound calmness. It felt as if she was embarking on her own journey toward trust. In the midst of this, my heart still held a place for Nori. I frequently left out food beneath the porch, hoping he might venture back. Sometimes I imagined catching a glimpse of him peeking from the trees, embodying that wild spirit that first drew me to him. His absence was more than just loss. It was akin to navigating a room with one door firmly closed, a reminder that love can come in many forms, sometimes quietly. People often inquire if I would consider another rescue. Honestly, I'm not certain. The unexpected nature of these moments has a way of shaping our decisions. What I do know is that love isn't always loud or obvious. It can manifest in the soft weight of companionship after a long day, or in the quiet acknowledgement of shared experiences. It might leave marks, but it also completes the heart in unforeseen ways. Have you ever felt the weight of choices you carry, sometimes unnecessarily? Reflecting on this can remind us that we are not alone in our journeys. Those subtle rescues, while not headline stories, can lead to profound transformations in our lives. I would love to hear your stories of welcoming animals into your life and what those experiences meant to you. Please share in the comments. If you know someone who understands the journey of nurturing, consider sharing this message with them. For those interested in more stories that resonate with authenticity and depth, subscribing might be a good idea. While these tales may not always wrap up neatly, they are rooted in real experiences. Thank you for taking the time to read this. As you navigate your own path, remember to keep your heart open, always ready for unexpected connections.